Warm welcome everyone to this webinar together with Marcus. And my name is Max, and I work on Signific. And just shortly about us, as we are hosting this event, before I let Marcus on the stage. Signific, we're a consultancy company that helps companies learn faster than their competitors by democratizing and utilizing their data. We work in roles in either product teams, data teams, and also help companies on this transformation journey to become more data-driven and create more value. But enough about us. This is what we're all here for. Listening to Marcus Castenfors. He's a product leadership coach at Crisp, and he's also the CEO and co-founder of HapKey, which I encourage you all to look up, a really good tool. He is also a dear friend of Signific and someone I've been working with, and he's been working with some of the clients we work with, and overall a great guy, and super excited to hear your talk today, Marcus.
Thanks a ton, Max, and thanks for inviting me to this Lunch and Learn session. So I'm going to talk about holistic product discovery and this framework that you see on the screen. The key question, and this is a question that you might think a lot about consciously or subconsciously. It might be something that you ponder upon when you're in the shower or waking up in the morning or when you're meeting your team. So will the stuff we're creating or we're working on right now be successful? And it's kind of like the fundamental question of product development, right? What does success mean to you? What does success mean to your team? And the ambition with this webinar is to tackle this question. So I'm not going to help you answer it completely, but hopefully give you some inspiration on how to look at things in a new way when it comes to product discovery. And together with Martin Christensen, I've written the book Holistic Product Discovery, and it's out now in Sweden. So we'll give you a link to the book later on in the webinar. And it's been a journey of about 3 years, and we've been iterating and building upon this book. And we've received tons of feedback throughout the years from a community of readers. So we're so grateful for all the feedback we have received. And we think it's the book is now in a decent shape. So we printed a limited edition. And the idea is to continue building it and working with our readers. So we're going to talk about 5 things. So the first thing is product is hard. It's hard out there, but that also makes it an amazing job. And then we're going to talk about building the right product. What does it mean to build the right product? What do you do? And then some principles that we have distilled from working with product teams over the last 10, 15 years over our careers. So what makes a successful team successful when it comes to product discovery? And some principles related to that. And then a framework that could be used as a guiding light or something to hang on to when it comes to product discovery. A sense-making tool when you work with product discovery. And lastly, I'm going to give you a risk mapping technique that could be also very useful in your team to tackle risks up front, to work proactively with product discovery, and to build psychological safety in your team. So that's going to be the finale. And then obviously we're going to have Q&A. So product is hard. Yes, it's hard, and you know it. It's messy. And John Cutler calls it a beautiful mess. Right? I really like that way of looking at product development. It's beautiful and messy, but that makes it the best job in the world. And I'm biased, of course, but I think that if you're working with product development, it's a fantastic job because you mix art and science, right? It's about the creative aspects and the ideas and the engineering and the data. That's the science part. And combining these 2 aspects is what makes product development so great. And it's hard, right? And just showing some statistics relating to how hard it is. So this is from CB Insights. They read 100 post-mortem essays by startup founders to dissect why they pulled the plug on their startup. And you can see that the number 1 fact was, or the number 1 reason was that there was no market need. So imagine that. Spending 3, 4, 5 years on a product that nobody wanted, right? That must be incredibly uncomfortable being a founder, right? And this does not only relate to startups, it relates to enterprises. I mean, I've been there in those situations where I've created products that not enough people wanted, right? And product discovery is about addressing this fundamental aspect, about creating something that meets a need, solves a problem. Another statistic relating to this is the 80-20 rule of product, right? So this is a statistic from Standish Group, and I've seen it myself firsthand working with an organization where we saw that 5 pages was 80% of the traffic, And it's the same thing in most organizations, most products, I would argue, that most of the functionality is not used, right? It's hardly ever used or infrequently used. And 20% of the features of functionality is often used. So what can you do, right? How do you find this 20%? And it's about working with product discovery to really understand your end user and your customer, to work in a structured way with product discovery to find those 20%. And a question to the audience. I've been there. So let's see, let's have a poll. So have you created something that didn't meet a need? Let's see, 19 answers. So we've been there, right? We've been there many times. And I learned from Dave Snowden, you might be familiar with Dave Snowden, is that we learn more from failure than from success stories. So it's a really an amazing opportunity to learn when you've not met a need, right? Because we as humans, we tend to learn from our mistakes. So now let's talk about building the right product. How do you build the right product? Think about that. What do you do to build the right product? Is there like a perfect recipe? Is there a fill in the blank scheme that you could use to build the right product? And it's a trick question, right? Because there's no one size fits all recipe to building successful products, unfortunately. If I had the answer, I would be a billionaire or a trillionaire or something like that, right? But there are some things. So please keep paying attention. There are some things that you could do to keep your team on the right track, to use as guardrails and when it comes to product discovery. And that is a discovery mindset principles. So I'm going to share 5 of them, and I advise you to create your own principles in your team. And then frameworks. So I'm going to give you a framework. There are plenty of frameworks that you can use, and also tools and techniques to work in a more structured way with product discovery. And let's start with mindset. So what is a discovery mindset and what is a delivery mindset? And the brain, you have the left-hand side and the right-hand side. It's kind of the same thing with discovery and delivery. So discovery is about building the right thing. So the right thing for end users and customers. And then delivery is about building it right. So building the right thing means that we need to learn a lot, and we need to learn in a fast way. And delivery is all the rigor that goes into engineering. So you build something that's scalable, reliable, performant, secure, etc. So the mindset of discovery is a learning mindset. You're not building anything. You want to uncover what the right thing is. And that's a big idea. So discovery, you shouldn't create code that's scalable, right? You should create code for learning. You should create a prototype for learning, but it shouldn't be something that's scalable, right? It's a tool for learning. And we summarize discovery to these things. So discovery is about understanding the problem to solve and then finding solutions to that problem. And what I said, it's about acquiring knowledge. It's about learning. And that's the fundamental essence in product discovery. And now let's shift the focus to principles. So we've been working with many teams over the years, and some teams have been successful and some haven't. And we distilled some principles that we felt the successful teams used when approaching product discovery. And the first principle is a problem-first approach over a solution first. So it's focusing on problems. We value solutions, don't get us wrong, right? We value solutions, but it's about understanding that the problem that's key. And Ash Maria has written the book Running Lean. He says, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And we think that's a really nice quote, because we tend to fall in love with our solutions, right? We love the prototypes or the stuff that we're coding or things like that. And as we progress in product discovery, we tend to lose focus of the problem. Like, what's the problem we're solving? Right? If I asked you 3 months later, what's the problem you're solving, you might have a hard time articulating that. So that's the key. Keep it top of mind. And let's listen to Backstreet Boys. Remember those guys? They had a very useful approach to product development by asking the question, tell me why, right? And that question can be used on customers or on stakeholders to uncover the problem that's important to the customer or stakeholder. And Spice Girls, they also have a very nice approach. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. And it's actually called the Spice Girls question by Stephen Bungay, who's written the book Art of Action. And it's a great way to uncover problems or needs. So you focus on that first and foremost. And the key thing here is that our recommendation is that keep your problem top of mind as you progress in product discovery. So next principle, outcome over output. So outcome, what comes out? is more important than the stuff, the features. And David J. Bland calls this the product death cycle. No one uses our product, so we ask customers what features are missing, and you build the missing features, and no one uses our product. It might ring a bell, right? And what's the key problem with this loop? The problem is that you're asking customers for features, or what features they want, right? Customers are experts at their problems, not solutions. You are the expert in your team. You're experts in product development. So uncover the problems and the needs rather than building what they want. And another kind of trap or fallacy in product development that we see all the time is the emphasis on building, the output, the stuff, over measuring and learning. So it's about focusing way more on measuring and learning the data, the user research, the insights, and then figuring out what to build. And this is kind of like the fundamental picture of your company and your customers. It's the same as it is today as it was 500 years ago when you had town square where people came to sell their goods, right? You have your company on the right-hand side and you have customers with problems and needs, and you give them products and services, and in return you get value back, right? And you could call it the value exchange. And it's about understanding the left-hand side so you can create the right products and services for your customers so you can get money in return or value in return, depending on the type of organization you're in. And this is, I got this inspiration from Melissa Perry, where I'm gonna quote in the next slide. So Melissa Perry says, why are we building this product and what outcome will it produce? And she's written the book, Escaping the Build Trap. And the entire book is a case study of avoiding focusing on output and instead focusing on outcomes. So a highly recommended read. The next principle, team diversity, trust and openness over individual effort. Product development is a team sport. If you think about your product team right now, you have perhaps a designer, data scientist, engineers, a product owner, a product manager. We all have our individual perspectives to add to the mix, right? And it's about combining these perspectives. And that's what creating great products is all about, you know, working together and treating it like a team sport. And we argue that the best products are not created by the best individuals, not even the group of the best individuals, but by the best collaborative teams, and teams who are open and diverse and trust each other. Right? And we can show that it's good for business. Right? Juliet Burke is a researcher in Australia. She did research on company directors a few years ago around diversity of thinking. And she found that if you have diversity of thinking in the room, you increase innovation, but you also decrease risk. And risk is so important to tackle in product discovery. And we're going to explore that further later on in the webinar. And Google, you might be accustomed to this research, but Google did a research study a few years ago around high-performing teams. So their research question was, what makes a high-performing team high-performing? What are the kind of attributes of that team? So they sent out surveys and they did research studies on these teams, and they found out that the number one aspect why a team was more or higher performing than the other was psychological safety. And what does psychological safety mean? It means you got each other's backs and it's okay to speak up the uncomfortable aspects relating to your product. And then the key thing is that you take risks together, because product discovery or product development is risky, right? We don't know everything that's going to happen, right? But we can tackle the risks and having each other's backs. And John Cutler, that I talked about earlier, gave us inspiration for this picture. Is that this is from Goonies, Där ska gänget in Swedish, an 80s movie, highly recommended. And this group of teenagers, they're looking for a pirate treasure in a cave. And you can see on the photo that they have each other's backs, right? They're taking care of each other. And it's about having that same culture in your team, because you're facing uncertainty, right, in your team, in discovery or delivery, and you do that together, right? If you build that in your team, then a lot of things will flow. The next principle, holistic view over local optimization. So having this holistic perspective when it comes to product development. And this is a big fallacy that we're seeing across the board. You probably sense it in your organization that you work in right now, that we tend to focus too much on ourselves, our team, or our function within the organization, whether that's marketing or customer service or product. It's about us, and we kind of lose track of what others are doing. And that's a big problem. And why is it a problem? Because this is the fact, right? What comes out is the user experience, but that's an amalgamation or a mixture of different functions within an organization. And depending on the type of organization you're in, it could be sales, marketing, customer success, engineering, design, etc. But all of that is combined into the user experience or the customer experience. And what happens if you're not aligned? Right? What happens? You probably know the answer, right? If we're not aligned, dysfunction is passed on to the customer, and you might end up in what you're seeing on the right-hand side there. And think about this. So when you visited an e-commerce website or a website last week or whatever it was, and then you saw that there were differences. If you clicked on navigation into one section and then you went to another section, there was completely different tonality or design or whatever it is. So that is a dysfunction that's passed on to the customer. And so you have this disconnected or disjointed user experience or customer experience. So the last principle, so continuous discovery over this unplanned exploration that we see sometimes, that you do discovery every now and then. And I'm going to show you some approaches to product development. Some are outdated and some are something that you focus on right now. So the first one is ad hoc, right? An ad hoc way of viewing product development. So you have an idea, you go straight into delivery, and then you have a product. Another way is to have a waterfall approach. So you have an idea, and then you do discovery, but it's not very iterative. You end up with a specification, and then you go into delivery, and then you have a product. An agile-ish, which we see most organizations apply nowadays, is that you have an idea, you do iterative discovery, so you learn, and then what you learn end up in a backlog, and then you go into delivery and have some sort of iterative delivery, and then you have a product. But where we want you to move to is this approach, where you work with discovery on a continuous basis. So you start off with discovery, you have a discovery mindset. It's all about learning, users, business, feasibility, etc. And then you felt you've learned enough, you can go into delivery. So you bring a small slice of value to the market, you get some learning back, and then you go into discovery. It's about switching mindsets and working continuously with discovery. And that's the best way to work with product discovery, in our opinion. So you work with product discovery in an iterative and incremental way. So a question to the audience: how could you describe your current approach to product discovery? Is it ad hoc, waterfall, agile-ish, or continuous discovery? Max, what are you seeing on the screen? How do you interpret the results?
It seems like agile-ish is the top contender, around 60% right now. But some are on continuous, some are on ad hoc, some are on waterfall.
And that's fine. The key thing is to adapt to your context. So I'm going to share some inspiration perhaps, and there might be some small things that you can do in your context to work more in a continuous fashion. So treat it as an evolution, not a revolution. So an example of how to add some continuous flavor into your ad hoc way of doing things could be to schedule user research every 2 weeks. So you invite 3 users to review prototypes every 2 weeks. And that's a way to kind of build this continuous mindset in your team. Let's move on to the next section. So the key thing when it comes to product discovery is to capture learning, right? And capturing learning is quite hard in product development. And typically we capture learning in documentation. So in Jira or Confluence or wiki documents and things like that. But the uncomfortable truth is that not that many people read these documents, right? So a recommendation from us is to treat prototypes as your *1 artifact to capture learning. So you're progressing and learning in discovery, but use your prototype to be the single source of truth, so to say, in product discovery. Because we love to touch and feel things as humans. We have a hard time kind of understanding interactions and so on if we read documentation. So focus your efforts on a prototype and iterate it often, right? So think about iterating your prototype 5 to 10 times a week. It doesn't need to be like big iterations. It could be moving a button or adding text or whatever, but have the focus of iterating your prototype and using that as a single source of truth. Here's a summary of the principles. So 5 principles: problems, outcome, the team, holistic view, and then continuous discovery. Great. And now let's move to the framework. So this could be your guiding light or sense-making tool in your team when it comes to product discovery. And what I talked about earlier, so we capture business value if we create user value. So that's kind of a fundamental aspect of product development. And you have seen this in the past, right? It's the holy trinity of product development. It comes from IDEO, a design agency in the US, and they talked about 3 qualities in harmony, right? And the 3 qualities they talked about was user value, business value, and practical feasibility. And user value means something that's valuable to the user and something that users understand on how to use. And business value is that what can we capture from the users in return for exchanging value. And then practical feasibility. Can we build it? Should we build it? Right? It's about understanding if it's feasible to bring to life. And if you combine these 3 perspectives, you have the right outcome. Another kind of framework that's out there is from British Design Council, and it's the double diamond. And it focuses on problems being a distinct mode, and then solutions being a distinct mode. And then you have diverging aspects and converging aspects, looking at problems and also solutions. Diverging meaning that you explore many problems and then converge on a single problem or a few problems. And in terms of solutions, you ideate many different solutions. So you diverge and then you converge on the most important or the most valuable solutions. So what we did, we created 4 distinct kind of stages or modes within the double diamond. So you're exploring things from a problem angle, you're structuring things, you're innovating, and then you're validating. And we put these 2 together and voila, you have a framework. And it's intentionally blank because you do product discovery already. You have plenty of techniques, but it's about understanding when to use the technique. When is it best? A screwdriver, hammer, which one is the right tool for the job right now? And we created this list of powerful questions that could help you when you're progressing in product discovery. So if you want to explore things from a business value perspective, what is our market landscape right now? Exploring that question. Or from a user value perspective, what is the user's context and needs? Right? What's the problem to solve? And then you have other powerful questions that will guide you in the right direction when progressing in product discovery. And you probably think of tools already that you could use for exploring user value. What do you do to explore user value right now? Might be user research, might talk to customer service and other stakeholders surrounding your team, right? These are just some examples. And when it comes to techniques out there, you have plenty of techniques when it comes to business value. So business model generation, requirements engineering, or lean startup, but they tend to focus on business value. And then you have design thinking methods, UX methods, lean UX, etc. And that tends to focus on user value. And from a feasibility side of things, you have organizational structure methods from HR regarding how to structure the organization. And then you have technical methods focusing on the solution side of things. So technical spikes or proofs of concepts and things like that. But you don't have a technique that applies across the board. So that's why we talk about this as a holistic product discovery framework. And you can fill it with whatever you want. And these are just some examples of techniques that you could use. So you see market research, customer research, stakeholder interviews, etc., exploring business value and user value exploration, user research, user interviews, analytics review, task analysis, etc. And you will get the presentation afterwards, so you can kind of look at this and see which tools are you using right now and which tools are you curious about. And you can have quite a few angles when it comes to this holistic product discovery framework. I showed you the powerful questions angle. Please write your own powerful questions. You can have an historic angle, so you can do a retrospective. So what did we use in this project? What kind of product discovery techniques do we use? The present angle, what are we doing right now when it comes to product discovery? Where are we? Are we in exploring? Are we in structuring? Are we in innovating, etc.? Toolbox angle. So brainstorm together with your team on a Miro board or on a whiteboard. What kind of tools do we have right now? And since you might have a diverse range of tools already. And then the last one is the playbook angle. So let's say you have a project kicking off in a couple of weeks. You can brainstorm with your team. So what are the techniques we're going to use throughout this project to discover, to learn? And this is a key slide. So please pay attention, because this is a big idea when it comes to product discovery. Because the key thing is to build something that customers want, right? Or end users want. And there are plenty of risks that you're building the wrong thing. And you can see the three qualities, the three perspectives as having specific risk, right? User value risk, business value risk, and feasibility risk. And remember, product development is a team sport. So it's about combining different perspectives and talking about risks and surfacing risks and working proactively with risk. That's what product discovery is about. And I'm going to give you a technique now to help you in that journey. And you could think about it as a pre-mortem. We're all accustomed to post-mortems, right? So kind of a retrospective when something has gone wrong, right? There was an incident or the project didn't go as intended. But the pre-mortem is a way of anticipating or thinking about what could go wrong. So you can surface risks and work with them proactively using product discovery techniques. And Shreyas Doshi was one of the first product managers at Stripe. He's now an angel investor in Silicon Valley. He has been a big advocate of the pre-mortem way of approaching product development. And he says that, and while we haven't been 100% mistake-free, pre-mortems have enabled calm product launches and have enhanced team productivity and morale. So think about that, enhancing morale. And he argues that if you have a pre-mortem, you also build psychological safety because you bring up the uncomfortable stuff, and it's okay to bring up the uncomfortable stuff. So doing a pre-mortem and working proactively with risks is really good stuff. And I've seen it firsthand. It really surfaces a lot of important things. And the way we approach it is slightly different than Shreyas Doshi, is that we recommend mapping risks and using this matrix. So having risk on one axis and then knowledge on another. So high risk, really, really bad if it happens. What are those things relating to your project? And then you can also color code different post-its. So from a user value perspective, business value perspective, and feasibility to see, what are the different types of risks in your project. So this is a perfect way to kind of kick things off in a new project or a new discovery. So what could go wrong? And to tackle those risks up front, right? So the high risk unknown things, right? It's about moving those to lower risk and to the left in terms of knowledge, right? So you can keep this mapping throughout your discovery to surface. And what have we learned? What do we need to learn now, or what do we need to focus on now? And this is probably the biggest slide of the webinar, is that if you've highlighted the risks up front in your team, you've done a big part of discovery already. And Marty Kagan, who's written the book Inspired and Empowered, he says that you've done 50% of discovery if you've just surfaced the risks. Think about that, right? You spend an hour or 2 hours in a workshop surfacing risks. That's a big chunk of work already when it comes to product discovery. So it's really important. And I've written a blog post about what we just talked about, a risk mapping technique. So it's going to be available. Yeah, you can click on that link that showed up. So you can learn more on how to facilitate this session with your team. And now let's open up for questions.
We already have two. Perhaps we can start up with those. So the first one is from Amin. Who does discovery in your ideal organization? Seems like everyone from product owners to devs, designers, and requirement analysts are part of the process.
So the simple answer is to focus on the three perspectives. So you have somebody who can focus on user value, business value, and feasibility. And Teresa Torres talks about the product trio, and I think that's a great way to approach product discovery. So you have 3 people responsible for these perspectives. But I also highly recommend that engineers are involved in discovery as well. So it's not just about viewing recordings of user research, but actually being a part of doing user interviews. Because the key thing that Marty Kagan keeps talking about, and I talk about a lot, is the idea of an empowered engineer. An empowered engineer is someone who understands the problem, right? And is passionate about solving that problem. And I've seen it firsthand what that does to a person, right? It brings a lot of engagement and excitement. And typically in most organizations, engineers are shielded because they're so valuable to produce code. But I think you're not doing the right thing if you have that kind of mindset when it comes to engineers. Engineers are sometimes the best people at coming up with ideas and solving problems in a different way. So please empower your engineers. So I hope that kind of tackles your question.
We got another question from Matthias. If you have a startup budget and or short on time, which part/tools of product discovery would you prioritize and why?
User research. So to work with user research continuously and to test prototypes with users, or if you're kind of exploring problems or you're doing generative research, working with user scenarios, creating a PowerPoint presentation of a future scenario that you intend to build in terms of your startup, and to show that to prospects that kind of fit your customer segment, and to get their thinking around that problem, that scenario, and to understand, A, is it relevant? B, is it new, right? Those are the two things that you should really focus on. Is it relevant? Is it new? Because that's innovation, right? And to keep on iterating those scenarios. And the scenario, I mean, like, see it as a storyboard that you can present to prospects, and to gauge whether it's relevant and new.
Got a question from Frederick, if you have any recommendations for tools to build prototypes.
I mean, I don't have like a new prototype to share. I mean, I think Treat took prototypes like a tool for learning, right? And you can use paper prototypes, if that makes sense, or Figma prototypes. We talk about low fidelity, medium fidelity, or high fidelity, and it's really about understanding what type of fidelity you should use. What are you testing? What are your research questions? And it might be, if it's straightforward, right, what you need to learn, and if it's not necessarily related to usability, you could show something really crude, like a sketch on a screen or a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. The key thing is to just get out and learn. And to use whatever tool makes sense.
Great. And then we have a question from Victor: how to get moving from agile-ish to continuous discovery? How do you make the transition?
There are plenty of approaches here. I'm going to mention a few. Is to work as a team when it comes to product discovery. Agile-ish, something that I see as an anti-pattern, is that you have silos within the team. So the product owner, product manager, and the UX designer go away and they work on product discovery, and then you hand over something to the engineers. But if you start to collaboratively work with product discovery, then you will address some things relating to moving to continuous discovery way of working. And this article that I just mentioned, I've seen it firsthand that it actually could be a great first step to work more continuously. So by mapping risks together, and then talking about product discovery is not something that the UXers do or some other people do. Right? It's something that you do together. And then the last thing is I mentioned it before in the presentation, but it's about setting up a cadence or a rhythm with user research or reviewing data and analytics or other things that you can set up to build like this discovery muscle, right? You meet with customers once every 2 weeks, or you talk to stakeholders, or you get exposed to other kind of insights, and to do that as a team.
We take another question from Johanna. How do you know what problems to bring through discovery or not? We do, for example, have problems that are somewhat simple and we're all happy about a straightforward solution. And then there are problems that are very complex.
Something that we did when we coached product teams 3-4 years ago is that we separated known versus unknown discovery. So known discovery is that you have a request from customer service that customers can't find this button or this page or whatever it is. It's pretty known, right? So you could start to prototype that. Right? But if it's unknown, it might be a new market opportunity or a new kind of problem relating to the customers. You need to do generative research, most likely. You need to talk to users and the right users. So separating known problems and unknown problems could be helpful, and that you need to have a different discovery approach depending on what you have. So create some classification that could be helpful. So to summarize, what can you do to work more with product discovery? So use the discovery mindset, or think about the discovery mindset. And it's a mindset of learning, acquiring knowledge together as a team. And then look at these principles. Maybe write your own or add to these principles. So to meet with your team, talk about these principles. And then frameworks. We gave you one framework today. There are plenty of others. Use the framework. Try using the framework. And something that Martin, my co-author, said is like, what is the the easiest, or not the easiest, but like the least thing you can do when it comes to the contents of the book. And he says that it's about just looking at the framework, right, in your project and see, have we done some exploration? Have we done some structuring, etc.? But that's the least thing you could do. Just see it as a mental model for product discovery. And then techniques, you use product discovery techniques already, but understand where you should use them and when you should not use them. And then build your toolbox, right, with your team. So thank you very much for listening and spending this lunch time with us. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can use your camera app on your phone and this QR code, and you can follow me. And again, thank you very much for listening. And then if you're curious about the book, it's out now in Sweden, Bokus, Adlibris, Akademibokhandeln. We have a website, it's holisticproductdiscovery.com. It's not completely finished, so you can go to the website, but the link to Amazon doesn't work yet. Hopefully this week we have the book on Amazon. And please, we want to build this community of readers. So if you read it, please write us some harsh feedback, perhaps, because we want to make the book better.
We also have a newsletter for similar events like this, webinars, articles. We only send out like maximum 2 emails per month, usually less than that. No junk. Please sign up for that so we see each other on future webinars. And I also want to give a big thanks to you, Marcus. You get a lot of praise in the chat. Really interesting to hear, as always. And I've read the first version of the book, and that was great. So now it's the second iteration. I'm sure it's even better. So really recommend you checking out that book.
Yeah, thanks for the love. Hope you got some inspiration on how to view product development in a new way. And please keep in touch. Write me on LinkedIn if you have further questions about product discovery.
Marcus, what do you say? Should we do some more Q&A?
Yeah, I'll call a few more.
Perhaps the one from Helder. So do you address product discovery differently when you're working B2C compared to B2B?
Yeah, so B2B and B2C, it's different, right? So in B2C, it's all about the user, because the user is also the customer. In B2B, that's a big fallacy that you tend to conflate both user and customer, but they're typically quite different, right? And then you might have a third segment as well, which is the champion, right? So you have a user who's using the product, and then you have a champion who's championing the product and kind of spreading the product in the organization, and then you have the customer who's paying for the product. So in product discovery, kind of a fundamental thing in B2B discovery is that you need to focus on all three, right? You need to create something that's valuable for the user, for the customer, and also for the champion, because it's about selling the product, addressing the kind of concerns that customers have relating to buying the product, and then making it valuable for end users who are actually doing or using your product on a daily basis. That's a short answer, and I can go on for half an hour.
Perhaps we can take Martin's question. So what would you say is the most challenging part of the framework to do well in practice? Do you have any concrete example on how to succeed with that challenge? So I guess kind of which vertical or which of the different values of the framework?
Well, the most important cell.
The most challenging part of the framework.
The challenging part is to get started.
Right.
A blank page is always the most uncomfortable thing. So to get started, take the first step is probably the biggest challenge. And where we recommend you to start is business value and explore, right? Because it's about capturing value from the market. You can do that by talking to stakeholders, exploring the market, looking at competitors, things like that, to explore business value. But it really depends on the challenge you have at hand, right? So I think you know the answer if you think about exploring business value. And something that I forgot to mention in the presentation is that you don't need to fill in all the blanks, right? You don't need to do that. It should serve as a mental model. So you can skip a step if you want, if you have enough kind of data and insight already, because it's about tackling risks. And if you've highlighted risks that you have a pretty set idea on what to do, then you can skip a lot of steps. So but the biggest challenge is to get started. Another thing, when it comes to your context as a team, you could actually do a lot of this stuff during 1 week. So you might be familiar with the design sprint methodology. That's a great way to do product discovery in a structured way during a week's time to kind of build up a product discovery muscle together with your team. So pick up the Sprint book by Jake Knapp and a few other authors and to learn more, because that's a kind of a Trojan horse on how to work more product discovery in your organization, and your organization might not be that accustomed to product discovery or that mindset.
I have a question from Emily here. How do you think about continuous discovery in platform teams, aka teams that don't directly deliver customer value?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. You can do it. So Martin has been working at King for a year and a half, maybe more, working with the platform team, doing continuous discovery. So you could apply the same thinking in that context. Just treat, the customer or the user is an internal customer or end user. So it's about doing research on addressing their problems and their needs. But then the same approach applies.
I think we have one more at least, but I'm not really sure on the question here. But could you elaborate about the known/unknown axis in the risk matrix, please?
Yeah, okay. So it's about knowledge. How much knowledge do we have right now in the team about that risk? So if it's totally unknown, then you need to explore it to tackle that. If it's known, you might have people in the organization or in the team who might have some insight on that particular risk. So it's about just isolating how much knowledge you have pertaining to a particular risk. I read the blog post and I go into detail on how to classify.
And as Marcus said, we are also happy to continue this discussion outside of this webinar, of course. Contact either Marcus or us as well. We love to talk about product. We love to talk about insights and how to do great product discovery. So
Yes.
With that said, perhaps we should give the final thank you, and hope to see you in the future.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. This was a lot of fun. And keep in touch.
All right. See you.
See you.